masters of 12-metre racing right in your home in a superb board game for only $19.95.
Look out, here comes Australia too.
Proceeds aid the Apex Diabetes Myelitis Appeal and the America's Cup Defence. America's Cup, the game, from any Apex club, or phone these numbers for information.
Makes me feel fine, blowing through the jasmine in my mind. Summer breeze makes me feel
Turn to 1206 6KY, where the music is nice and easy all day long.
When something insignificant like a plastic bag is sucked into the intake, and this is what...
Turn to 1206 6KY, where the music is nice and easy all day long.
Their cup challenges seemed almost docile.
Well, it's a hard series to get through the eliminations. There's a lot of very good boats. The results perhaps don't show that up, but the Italian boat and the Challenge 12 and the Canadian and the Victory are very fast boats. So we are getting some very good speed work. Well, we have the benefit of the experience of the previous three challenges. It's a more professional approach. I think we're cooler, quieter, and just doing the job.
Australia, too, needed a summer of trial racing to prove her worth. Indications that she was fast, faster than any of the other 6 challengers, became apparent by mid-July. By then, the complicated elimination series was a month into the summer. Australia, too, was winning most every race. Syndicate Executive Director Warren Jones explains why.
We have a bank of knowledge. We have a number of our crew are back here for the 4th time. We've got a tremendously good helmsman. Our sails this time look good. We're feeling comfortable. We've got to eliminate 6 boats before we can get to the Americans, and we're here to get to the Americans. The other challengers are a nuisance as far as we're concerned, but they're out there to try and send us home. So the proof of the pudding's in the eating. We've got to get out there and beat 6 boats.
The advance team had paced itself with a veteran 12-metre Gretel II in Sydney, Australia, the winter before coming to Newport. The crew had no way of telling how their boat compared to the newer 12s. It was all a guess. Unfortunately for the team from the Royal Sydney Yacht Squadron, their guess was wrong. The boat was slow, too slow. By the end of July, it was impossible for her to score enough points to continue. On July 29, she was dismasted in an 18-knot breeze. The crew valiantly re-stepped another mast in 2 days. On the 3rd day, July 31st, she sailed her last race, having won only 2 of 36 trial races. She was the first to be eliminated from contention. A great deal was expected from Australia's Challenge 12, the boat sponsored by the Royal Yacht Club of Victoria near Melbourne. Most importantly, she was designed by Ben Lexon. He designed an unconventional 12-metre, which was Australia 2, and a traditional boat, Challenge 12. He was confident of both.
First, I was full of confidence when I did the 2 boats. I thought, this is it. They're going to beat the old boat we had, etc., etc. And then for the last month or so, I hadn't slept very well because I was thinking, oh, maybe they're both bad boats because they're very close to each other's performance. The Victorian boat, the Challenge 12, is a medium to light air, but the other boat, which everybody knows is the one whose underside we hide, is designed specifically to go in every weather. And it's actually strongest in the heavy weather. Well, I'm not going out the whites, am I? Like it's on today probably, and I can't stand to see my children fight.
Challenge 12 did well in the early trial races, but she started losing when point totals weighed more heavily in the scoring. Dashed were the hopes of a highly competitive crew, and for no apparent reason other than a lack of experience. When eliminated from competition on August 4, the Australian contender had won 24 of her 40 races, a record considerably better than Advance and France 3, but not good enough. The Canadian boat was the next to go under. Canada 1 squeaked her way into the semi-final race series just ahead of Challenge 12. But the momentum she had gained on the tail end of the previous round-robin trial races did not last. Most of the time, it was a case of an underfinanced campaign and too little, too late. The boat had potential. The white hull design was the brainchild of Bruce Kirby, the world-class laser designer. But like the other 12 meters that summer, except one, Canada One was a conventional boat. She sailed her last race of the 1983 competition, August 22. She had won 19 of her 49 trial races. The Italians were the surprise of the summer. Italy had never campaigned for the America's Cup before, but from the start, the Italians did everything right. They bought the 12-meter Enterprise from the Freedom Syndicate in 1981, learned how to sail her off the coast of Sardinia, and hired Italian designer Andrea Vallicelli to build a boat from Enterprise. The result was the 12-meter Azzurra. The Italians had gone farther than even they had anticipated, winning 25 of their 49 races. It was a brilliant showing for a first-time effort, and there was no doubt that the Italians would be back. The last challenge contender to go under was the British team, who also happened to be the most relentless. The Victory Syndicate was supercharged by Peter de Savary, a British Bahamian banker and investment entrepreneur who turned his America's Cup challenge into a mega corporation fueled by an $8 million budget. De Savary strolled and cajoled, infecting his entourage of more than 80 people with the uncanny sense that winning the America's Cup was more important than even themselves.
I'm Peter de Savary, and it's my job to make sure that Great Britain uses every effort and every resource at its disposal to take away from most of you in 1983 the Great America's Cup.
Money was no object. De Savary lived aboard his sumptuous 140-foot motor yacht, Charisma, once owned by Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. The Victory Syndicate built two new 12 meters, Victory and then Victory 83. The 1980 America's Cup Challenger Australia One was used as a trial horse. The syndicate kept 4 houses in Newport for staff, as well as a luxury condominium overlooking its waterfront dock space. At de Savary's disposal was a Magnum 53 speedboat, a flotilla of smaller craft, a helicopter, and a seaplane. Lavish parties and formal dinner dances rounded out the workload of a summer on the water. The British held out longer than anyone against the Australian superboat. In fact, in the final race series between Victory 83 and Australia 2, the British team claimed one race in the best of 4 out of 7 series. It was, however, tantamount to putting the finger in the dike. Australia 2 won the series 4-1 and finished the summer of trial racing with 48 wins and 6 losses. On September 5, Australia 2 won the right to challenge for the America's Cup. As the challengers battled it out on one race course, the American 12s were engrossed in their own trial series. Choosing a defender was up to members of the New York Yacht Club America's Cup Committee, a group of 9 men with a single purpose in mind, to choose a boat that could beat a foreign challenger. Throughout the summer, the committee plied the waters of Rhode Island Sound, following its 3 charges, Liberty, Defender, and Courageous. It was a grueling summer for the committee. Nothing came easy. It took 3 sets of trial races to sift out a defender. Increasingly, the fear that Australia 2 might be faster than anyone anticipated could not be dismissed. The committee confronted its fears with questions on the boat's legality and on the source of its design. And still there was the ominous job of choosing a defender. Gary Jobson, tactician on the 12-meter Defender, tells how it was done.
The difference between the foreign elimination trials and the American elimination trials is pretty dramatic. The Americans are a selection series. The New York Yacht Club Selection Committee, which is 8 very experienced sailors, will select the best boat to be the Defender this coming summer. I hope it's the Defender. And they'll select us based on our performance.
The Defender Courageous Syndicate campaigned 2 boats under one corporate umbrella, but the crews remained distinct. Defender, the new boat designed by naval architect David Pedrick, was the immediate favorite. Courageous, as the old boat and 2-time defender of the America's Cup, took a back seat early on, but not for long. The competition was strong. Tom Blackaller, a West Coast yachtsman and sailmaker in charge of the North Loft in San Francisco, was skipper of Defender. Blackaller moved into the America's Cup arena for the first time in 1980 when he joined Russell Long and crew on the 12-meter Clipper. When it came time to think about a 1983 defense, he and Gary Jobson collaborated on a crew and the building of a new boat. The syndicate had high hopes for Defender, but as the summer wore on and preliminary trial races gave way to observation trials in midsummer, it became clear that Defender needed work. She was good in light air, but in anything over 10 knots, she started losing races to Courageous and Liberty. The threat of Australia 2, meanwhile, was ever present. Courageous did poorly in the July observation trials compared to a performance earlier in the summer. Defender, meanwhile, was only sailing well in light air. Dennis Conner and his team continued to win races with Liberty, chalking up an unofficial 13 wins and 5 losses for the July series. But the boat's performance was inconsistent and at times baffling. The only thing that seemed certain was that Conner and his team had finally made up their minds. They would campaign Liberty. Efforts within the syndicate to sail Freedom instead, despite the fact that she was a 1980 boat, hit an unexpected roadblock. Conner discovered that making structural changes to Freedom would nullify its protection under a grandfather clause in the 12-meter rule. Freedom, it turned out, was sailing with a freeboard allowance that was highly penalized in the new rating. To change her, which the syndicate did before realizing the consequences, resulted in a loss of more than 35 square feet in sail area. By leaving her sail area intact, she no longer qualified as a 12-meter. But she made an excellent trial horse for Liberty. Defender sailed her last race, August 27. She had rallied 2 days before, beating Courageous in 3 straight races, but they were all in winds of less than 10 knots. Liberty beat her this last day in a 17 to 22 knot breeze. The committee had seen enough. Courageous held on a week longer. She had done surprisingly well in the final August trials, rallying from her July slump. It was touch and go between Courageous and Liberty throughout the month. The selection committee was ready for a winner, but the 2 boats kept exchanging victories. Then finally Liberty and the Conner machine marched ahead. In the last 8 races, Liberty won 6. The committee had the edge it was looking for. On September 2, 3 days before Australia 2 won her right to challenge, Liberty was named the defender. The issue of the keel by now had turned into a full-blown controversy. The New York Yacht Club was on the offensive. The Australia 2 syndicate took the defensive. The Yacht Club issued weighty documents questioning the legality of the keel. Suspect was its increased draft as measured when the boat heeled under sail. Its legality as a peculiarity under the international 12-meter class rule, and the origin of its design. Specifically, did Ben Lexon have help from the Dutch in designing the keel? Under rules stipulated in the America's Cup deed of gift, the boat was supposed to be designed by an Australian. Efforts by the Australians to keep the design a secret became increasingly difficult. For a time, it was as if yacht racing itself was all but forgotten.
We came here and the International Measurement Committee measured the boat. They passed the boat, they said it was okay. I asked them if they had any problem with it, and they said, no, it's quite all right. They even commented they didn't think it was very unusual.
Robert McCullough, chairman of the New York Yacht Club Selection Committee, looked at it differently.
Well, I think that the Australians have played a very smart game here in shepherding this idea through without having it come into the open and having it be challenged earlier. No question, they fooled everybody on the measurement because everybody was allowed to be there at the measurement, and they had a lot of armed guards around, and I think they buffaloed everybody from getting in there, and I didn't even know about it at the time. Otherwise, we would have demanded to be in there, which we had every right to be in there, and that would have saved a lot of the argument that came along later on when we finally found out what the keel was all about.
We've been here now almost 2 months.